Welcome, everyone, to our Wednesday devotional and Bible study period. If you would, turn your Bibles with me to Genesis chapter 32. Genesis chapter 32, and in just a few moments, we'll be over in Philippians chapter number 1. But I hope each of you are doing well. We are thankful that you are with us. For the last couple of Wednesdays, we've been looking at some of the items, some of the stories out of the book of Genesis in regards to the patriarchs. And today in our text, we come to that point in which Jacob wrestled with God. I'm picking up in Genesis chapter 32, beginning in verse number 24. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now, when he saw that when he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, "Let me go, for the day breaks." But he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." That was a bold statement, don't you think? So he said to him, "What is your name?" He said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For you have struggled with God and with men and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked, saying, "Tell me your name, I pray." And he said, "Why is it that you ask about my name?" And he blessed him there. So Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. You know, from this point forward, the people of God are the descendants of Jacob. They're descendants of Israel, or the Israelites, and this was certainly a significant moment in time. You may recall that Jacob's name means deceiver or deceived, and now this name change coming to Israel, which is connected to the idea of prevailing, the idea of struggling, and this idea of prevailing in the midst of struggle. Isn't that what the story of Christianity is all about? Prevailing in the midst of struggling. Or your translation or an idea connected is striving, and we're going to see that in Philippians chapter number 1. But you and I want to prevail. And we all have been given a new name, and that name is the name of Christ. We are known as Christians. Now, it's kind of interesting that even in the very next verse and several other places in the Old Testament, Jacob, even though he was now known as Israel, at times was still referred to as Jacob. And so some folks have tried to make sense exactly what is being meant there, but most likely the idea that not simply or only known as Jacob, but also known as Israel. And maybe a similar comparison is when we are baptized into Christ, we become Christians. I'm still known as Eric, but I have now a new name, and that is of Christ, of Christian. You are still known by your name, but your life now has much more meaning now that you've put on the name, now that you wear the name of Christ. But what a significant moment that the struggle was real. Yes, the struggle is real. That's a common saying today. The struggle is real in our lives, but with God, we can and we will prevail. That's the big idea. Even though we struggle, even though we suffer, with God, we have the opportunity to prevail. We have the opportunity to be victorious. Life won't always be easy, and it certainly won't always go as we had planned, but as we struggle, as we strive, we're going to prevail. Jacob got a new name, and his name was then, and he was then known as Israel, as God was with him, and he had prevailed. Look over, if you would, into Philippians chapter number 1, verses 27 through 30. Philippians 1, verse 27 through 30, as we try to connect a couple of dots here. Paul says this: "Only let your conduct be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or absent, I may hear of your affairs, that you stand fast in one spirit, with one mind," here we go, "striving together for the faith of the gospel." It's a similar idea of what was occurring as Jacob wrestled with the angel. He was struggling. He was striving together for the faith of the gospel, and not in any way terrified by your adversaries, which is to them a proof of perdition, but to you of salvation, and that from God. For to you it has been granted on behalf of Christ, not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for his sake, having the same conflict which you saw in me, and now here is in me. We all know that as Christians, we're going to suffer. We're going to struggle. We're going to be wrestling with different things in life, wrestling in a sense that causes us to, it will certainly test our faith. And as we often sing, yes, Jesus knows all about our struggles, and he will guide till the very end. But I suppose the word that is sticking out to me the most here in Philippians 1, verse 27, or maybe the phrase, is this idea of striving together. The idea that we, yes, are suffering, but we're not alone. And we have Christ, obviously, but we have each other. Jacob wrestled with God, or as he was striving, it said that he was struggling with God and men, and he prevailed. And we as Christians today, we suffer, and we're thankful for God and the blessings that he has given to us. But as we are wrestling, as we're striving, as we're struggling, we're not alone. Paul says to have one mind, striving together. I know it's very tempting sometimes to isolate yourself. I know it's very tempting sometimes to be secluded, or to basically to put up walls around you, and to just hibernate, and to camp out, and not to be around anyone, and for whatever the reason. But we have been wired, we have been created as relational beings, and so we need Jesus, we need Christ, but we also need to have one mind. We also need to be together. And that's why when we come together to worship, not forsaking the assembling, it's not just so we can check off the to-do list each week that we went to church, but it's the idea of being together, being with God's people, being with like-minded folks who have the same goal, who have the same mind, who have the same purpose, so that we can know that we're not alone, that God is with us, and the church is with us. Suffering is hard enough. Why suffer alone when God has given us the blessing of being able to strive together with fellow Christians, other people who have put on the name of Christ, other people who are trying to get to heaven, other people who are trying to live godly, other people who are preaching and teaching truth, other people who are believers in Christ. Don't try to do this Christian life. Don't try to do this life alone. Be connected to God and be connected to his church with one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel. I hope this message has been helpful to you. We will see you next time. Take care and God bless.